honest answers. Do you have any idea what's going on out there? I'm gonna try and help your new family.
I want to thank you again for letting us stay here.
Just gonna run through a few things. When we go out during the day, we like to stick to groups just for safety. The red door, it's the only way in and out of the house. It stays closed and locked all the time. I have the keys. It's the only set. Most important thing.
What's he see?
It's okay. Just go inside.
We never go out at night.
The door was already open when you got there.
Yeah.
Then who opened it?
I think they're sick. Put your mask on. Nobody's sick here.
Can't trust anyone but family. You don't get it.
How old are you, Travis?
If they're sick, then I am too.
If you're lying to me, I will kill you.
Guys, keep clapping for one of the best horror movies in a very, very long time. I use the word horror kind of lightly because this is a different kind of horror movie. I mean, I know horror is a genre that sells and people will go see that, but you definitely do everything you can within that genre and tell a different kind of story. Talk about the process of working within that, but doing something that I think was personal and interested you in you more so than genre.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing with the movie. I mean, it stemmed from a personal place first, you know, and it was losing my dad. And then this movie spewed out of me. And I became like really excited and fascinated by like if I could put those personal elements into this totally fictional story and see how people took that, you know? So if you want to come just for a scary movie, there's that. But I'm more excited by like if the movie thinks, you know, if you get home at night and you're laying in bed staring into the darkness and you start thinking about this movie, that excites me and I want people to talk about it after. So I say, like, don't go to it just expecting a conventional horror movie because I think a lot more is going on.
Within that conventional horror movie, though, I think what is scary about these characters is what also grounds them in reality. It's not necessarily the thing outside that they're afraid of, it's the thing that they're trying to do that sort of starts to overtake them a little bit. I think of Joel's character and trying to protect the family and being the father and being a good example. I think of Kelvin's character and what he's dealing with as a as a son and as a 17-year-old, dealing with his sexuality, dealing with his fears and growing apart from his father. And I think of Carmen's character dealing with tragedy and dealing with supporting her husband in the face of all this. All of that has very little to do in some respects with the sort of larger post-apocalyptic theme that is going on here. Can you talk about crafting that?
Yeah, and I think at first it kind of started with horror movies I love. You know, if you look at The Shining or The Thing or Night of the Living Dead.
Dr. Giggles.
But it's like what I really love about those movies is what the horror does to the people. You know, if you look at The Thing or Night of the Living Dead, I think it's less about the monster, less about the zombies, and it's more about the fear and the paranoia it instills in those people. So I was excited by that, and I was also excited at the idea of like a family drama in that, and caring about these people and these stories, and yeah, that was fun to me.
Joel, when did you get involved in the film, and what drew you to it?
I read the script, and I watched Trey's film Creature, which, if anyone hasn't seen that, they really should see that. For many reasons, it's a great film, and it's also a great exercise in seeing what somebody very smart and very resourceful can do with almost no money. and by convincing their family to be in a movie. But he had turned Thanksgiving into a very terrifying sort of psychological drama, and by reading his script for this movie, It Comes at Night, I realized if he could do that with a family in a suburban house during the daytime, that he could really elicit a real sense of unease and dread and fear in this movie. And then we met each other. So it was a few months before we started shooting, and I was very taken with him, and it felt like a really great project to dive into. You know, I love young filmmakers, and I love this genre, and sadly it's not done well enough, often enough. And I know we've seen movies like Get Out and this movie. I think
even your film, The Gift, to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously, I'm interested in unsettling an audience, you know, in the right way too. And I think if you can do it without stacking up the bodies for no reason, but create something that's an experience, but also has something to say, then you know, it's worth the journey.
Joel brings up the point of you work mainly with your family on your last film, Krisha. I mean, I think if you can convince your family to be in a movie, you can probably convince anybody to do a movie with you. But what was it like working with actors versus non-actors this time?
It wasn't that different. My big thing with all of these guys...
Tell the truth, Trey.
Much harder work, far more demanding.
I mean, look, I don't know any of them like I know my mom or my aunt or, you know, my friends and stuff, but I wanted us to become a creative family. And when I met all of them, number one was that they're good human beings, and I feel that, and that we would jive with that, you know? And if we start there, then... That's all I need, and I'm a fan of their work and think they're insanely talented. So it started there, and then I won't lie, the first day or two I was nervous, and it was weird, and it took me a second. But, you know, quick into it, you start making a movie, and I think by the end of the first week, we were a family with the crew and us and everything, and it was lovely.
At least if you hated working with us, you don't have to see us again. But your family, you got to deal with for the rest of your life. And I have to mention Chris Abbott and Riley Keough, who are not here, who are in the cast as well, who are awesome, who are part of the Quasi family.
Carmen, how long was the shoot? How long were you guys at this place in the woods?
I think we were upstate New York for about 6 weeks. Some of that time was prepping. And to become a family, we did a few things that were a little unconventional. So, you know, we would get together, Kelvin, Joel and I, and you made a really great, resourceful meal out of not very much canned food, I remember.
You made a survivalist meal for them?
We kind of sort of went through some of the things that we knew we'd be going through in the movie, and it really had this bonding effect. So, yeah, it was a really great way to enter into the fray and get a sense of what it would be like to have very little. Yeah, it was a really, really great summer.
I'm curious, when you sort of create a family dynamic, and there's also a family dynamic that's being played in the film, obviously what's being played in the film is different than what you guys getting together as actors and developing a comfort. How much do you want that sort of realistic, the reality dynamic that you're creating to mirror what you're doing on film, or do you just want to create a comfort zone so that you guys can pretend well together?
I mean, I think ultimately it's all got to sort of relate to the material that's on the page. So I think there's probably a little bit of both, really. What do you think?
It felt real to me. Everything about it felt real to me at the end of the day. Because the first day I met Joel, I went to his, well, not the first day I met Joel, but the second time I went to his house and I started doing chores. and then we made a fire and all this stuff. And then, like, I desperately wanted him to like me. So, like, every day until the end of the day.
Trying to make Dad proud.
Oh, absolutely. That was, like, until, like, I remember at the rap party, I was like, do you like me? I was like, because I was like, I don't know. I was like, did it work? Am I doing okay? Am I a good son? And, like, and we
I said, you're in front of me. I'm on my way to the bar, kid. Get out of the way.
Someone was like, that means Joel likes you. Don't worry, don't worry.
No, he loved. Jay was like, Joel loves you. Oh, sure.
Kelvin, you know, the movie is sort of through your character's eyes, which is a brilliant concept to sort of take it through his eyes. Most people, I think, would put it through the father's eyes or the newcomer's eyes. Did that feel like a lot of weight on your shoulders? How did you and Trey sort of get through this on a day in and day out basis? It seems like it's a pretty heavy thing to go through.
I had a lot of questions.
Yes.
I remember that day we went to dinner, and then afterwards I got in the car with Trey, and I was like, okay, let's start from the beginning. Why, and why? You know, so it's like there's so many relationships that because he has like a one-on-one with basically each character in the film, and it was just figuring out how are they different, and what do the nightmares mean, and how do the nightmares go with these relationships? What does it say? You know, so it's always asking questions like, what does it mean? And he would say, who's to say?
I don't like giving a lot of answers, but I will say, like, I was so impressed with Kelvin, and like he came onto it like a pro and blew me away. And he studied this script to death and had a million questions and had note cards, and he was amazing.
Trey, when did the dreams come into the writing process? Because it's such a clear idea of what happens when someone is grieving and they're in a stressed out situation. Odd dreams can take effect like that.
Totally. It was from the beginning. It started with that. It grew a bit as the first pass of the script spewed out of me in 3 days. So, of course, things changed a bit after that. But I always...
3 days?
Yeah, well, it was like hand-scribbled, crying, it was nasty. But, yeah, I was, like, grieving at the time. So, but, yeah, I wanted the core of that to, like, really remain. I forget, what was the first half?
About the dreams.
Oh, yeah,
coming up with the dreams, yeah.
So,
I'm still blown away by the 3 days of grief is like a limitless drug for you. That's unbelievable. Like, how did that happen?
I don't know. I don't know. It just it was like time, and it spewed out of me, and the important thing was keeping that all the way through. But then the dreams in particular excited me, not just because they could be scary, but that you could learn more about this kid and learn what he's going through, and each one has a specific purpose and speaks to where his head state is at that time.
Yeah. Joel, talk to us about your character. He's really the greatest representative of paranoia and what paranoia can do to a person in the film.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, one of the great things I think about films that are scary are when they involve characters that are human beings that can do bad things, because there's nothing more relatable than to sit in the cinema and think that you can relate this to real life rather than the villains or the ghosts or the aliens. And the idea that one element of the danger of this film is not just what's out there and what's happened, but the question of trust and paranoia. And quite often you see movies as well where the people that are survivalists or they're living in a certain way, they're all ex-military or they're ex-service people of some kind, and they're all adept at looking after themselves in a kind of a Wild West way. And it's really nice that in this film you discover the sort of histories of characters that are just regular people. So what if the kind of, I'm not saying this one of the characters, what if the manager at Radio Shack had to then look after himself in a survivalist way? So there's a constant sort of real world, real normal, real people aspect of an edge of paranoia, of constantly reading each other, and this question that family comes first. And in my interpretation, part of the reason I got involved with this, because it really says a lot about today and our treatment of other people and our paranoia about what other people might have on their mind in terms of their intentions, and the idea that family represents culture and the house may represent a country is not lost on me, but it's not reaching for that as some illustration of something else, because it's also just a movie. Yeah. But so I really love, Paul is really that guy who's trying to look after his family, but is maybe not 100% capable of everything, but he's having to improvise along the way as the whole family is trying to sort of provide, make do, improvise constantly, and then now have to read another family that's come to either be part of a community or maybe something else.
Do you think about sort of what is fearful for Paul in regards to the greater things outside of the forest, or do you sort of latch onto this idea that this could be a man just protecting his family from outside ideas, external influences?
I think definitely, for me, script is always first, and I think what Trey has done with the screenplay, or had done before we even started shooting, was so clear in terms of, while there's a great sense of mystery for everybody, and the hard thing about talking about a movie like this is people have just got to go see it to answer the questions, because if we answer them for you, it's well, we've saved you some money, I guess. But the
I'm doing my best to do no spoilers right now.
but the idea that Paul has latched on to rules to make sure that there's a certain safety aspect, that if you follow this pattern of rules, then we live longer. And if you don't follow these rules, bad things can happen. And I think he's holding on so tight to those rules that holding on tight sometimes is the reason why things can go wrong. And holding on tight is also the reason why he may justify having the list of rules. So there's pros and cons to it. But I think almost, particularly character-wise, I hold on very tight to a son. And it says a lot about the way, to me, a father treats a son or a child in terms of, you know, maybe asking too much of a child and demanding too much, growing up too quickly.
And I love the fact that there's something so authentically messy about the personas and the characteristics of all of these people. None of them start out as villains or angelic, so I think it's really great that by the end of it, that when it all becomes somewhat calamitous and takes on whatever form it does, that you didn't see it coming necessarily, you know, because no one goes into it with particular intentions or particular sort of colors. And I think often that's the thing that makes horror movies a little bit more predictable and less intriguing. I'm sure I speak for myself, and I'm sure for all of the actors, it does start on the page, and it really does have to be about character being nuanced and interesting, and then it can be any genre. Because I think that's the stuff that really is the glue and makes it a story worth telling.
What was the first thing that you saw on the page for your character that drew you to the project?
I mean, I think a mother character that had torn loyalties between husband and son, and what that does to a woman, and where you then lie if you can't figure out quite how to marry the two and make them work successfully. I think that's a dilemma that so many women face, and I thought that was incredibly fertile ground to explore and to bring to the screen, and then to add to the fact that it's a genre that I grew up loving. Clearly, Trey was influenced by the same kind of films that I was. I knew that it was going to have the right kind of treatment that would match the golden era of horror movies, which for me was more the 70s, I think. And it had flavors of that era, of those kinds of movies.
Social paranoia.
Social paranoia, absolutely, and neurosis and character-driven. So that was the stuff that I saw that, you know, made me really excited. And I was, after seeing Keough, I was also like, I'll do anything he's written, I'm on board. So, and then obviously to work with other really great actors.
Going back to that, you know, when you made Keough, I'm sure you made it for a very small amount of money, fairly low budget, all your family cast in a house that you were staying in at the time, I think, where you shot it, right?
Yes.
Moving into this, I'm imagining you had a slightly bigger budget. What did that feel like as a filmmaker? Did it feel like you could make your day a bit easier, or does it feel like every filmmaker says where you always want more?
I actually know it was harder to make my day. Really? Just because there were more parts, you know, and there were new difficulties. Just like there were boards on all the windows. That takes time to light. There's a bigger crew. It takes longer to move around, that kind of thing. But like I said before about everything, like it really wasn't that different, you know. It was just a little bit bigger. It was still primarily one location and everything, and I was with my creative family, and yeah.
What was your pre-production like going into shooting the film? Because the film has such a specific look, and it does in some ways call back to some of the horror films that we're talking about, like The Shining, I think, in particular, with how you use your camera, but not so much to the point where it even feels like an homage. But were you going into it with your DP looking at those films and talking about them?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you know, we went through a bunch of films. We went through the script a ton. We shot list a ton. And that's our thing. Like, it's always the same thing with Keough. We're like super specific and prepared for exactly what we want to do, but ready to play within that. Like if we get inspired on the day or something, we can totally shift that and do something else. So it was just a balance on that, but it was meticulous. And then one of the just biggest obvious things with it is, like, the movie's called It Comes at Night. Night's in the title. We want to feel night. You know, like a lot of movies do night lighting, you know, and it doesn't feel like night. you don't feel the darkness. Like in this movie, we really wanted to feel the darkness, you know, and you just let it only be lit by practical flashlights and lanterns and everything, and yeah.
Was that hard to is that hard to accomplish, or is that easier to accomplish?
It not with the cameras we have nowadays and like an Alexa and stuff. You just you know, it's boring, but you just need extra beef on the light and stuff.
Boring to them, interesting to me. Sorry. Let's get some questions from the audience right here.
Hi, my question is for Carmen. Does it feel doing a thriller than your previous works like Sally Hemings or Boycott or Selma? How did it feel doing the thriller, different genre?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always drawn to material that that features compelling and complicated women. And I think that's probably the through line in all of the material, even if genre-wise it's very different. So yeah, those pieces, Sally Hemings, Selma, any of that would be more sort of historical, but I think at the center of them are women that are really very nuanced and interesting to me. And that's very much the case of Sarah in It Comes at Night, I think.
Next question.
Hey guys, so I actually got a chance to see the film earlier, and I thought it was really great. I think everyone else should get to see this. I was just wondering, like, for you guys, like, what was it like being able to portray this tight-knit family? Like, what was that process like?
Any takers?
Look, it was a very special film. I think this is the first time that I've been involved in a film where we got to be in one location predominantly, and being in a small town rather than shooting by living in a city and then going out to one location. So it felt like we were in one small place shooting in an even smaller place. And that had a lot to do, that informed a lot of not just what we had to do as a small group of actors or as a family, but the whole crew. And it makes everybody kind of gel together and come together, and surely if there were frictions, that would probably exacerbate as well. But there was such a really great feeling on this, and it meant that when we weren't shooting also, like what we had was a big house where the production office was, and we all had rooms upstairs from that to get dressed, and then we would get driven across to the house where we were shooting. And when we were shooting, we pretty much just hung out on the lawn and, hung out together. So I think that also helped. You weren't a big movie where actors are going off to their trailers and,
Was everybody pretty much on set, like every day, or did you?
Yeah, we were all kind of, no one ever really, there were no prima donnas that sort of went off to their like little corner or anything. We all just hung out, except you sometimes, but we won't talk about that. But
Like if you had a day off from shooting, did you, like, if you weren't on that day, or was it pretty much everybody on every day?
yeah, we all
Go down to Woodstock and chill out. We're in Woodstock.
Woodstock's the best.
You know, go and get a tie-dye T-shirt with
But
a
the-
unicorn on it. I literally own one, I'm not kidding.
But the other thing is, like, Trey's style is so experimental just as you were saying, like, you're super prepared, but there is also the element of experimentation that I think we all embrace, and which means you all kind of recognize that you're taking a chance together, and that inevitably creates a sense of family, because you all know you're kind of taking a bit of a risk. That's been my experience on films that are a little riskier, like this one.
And you also you're talking about a guy who's willing to shoot an entire scene in one shot, in a way that is really gutsy, rather than, he'd pick his sort of, this is my interpretation, he'd pick his certain moments within the story where he really went for something. In terms of that, there's a scene with Chris Abbott and I that's all one shot. And it's not just a short scene too, but it's orchestrated beautifully, and you feel a certain sense of immediate electric commitment to a scene when it's not broken into parts, that you can, do a handful of takes here and a handful of takes here. It's like, all right, we got to all be on the same page together at the same time and get it right. So, the only negative thing about the movie was occasionally getting hot under a gas mask. That's all I can say bad about it. And that's not a bad thing.
I'm curious, when it comes to sort of getting into a scene like that with Joel and Chris, where it's all going to be one shot, did you have that planned out beforehand? You wrote that scene and you're like, okay, this should all be one shot. And then when you get to shooting it on the day, how fearful do you get of that commitment that you've already made? Like, what if you start setting up that one shot and you're seeing right there, like, uh-oh, this isn't going to cut the way that I needed it to, or these performances need to be broken up a little bit?
Well, anytime you embark on something, you know, like an 8-10 page scene in one take, I mean, it's a bold move. So of course, but it's like fun nerves. Like, are we going to pull it off or not? And
Do you leave yourself room to not pull it off, or do you sort of just go in as bold as possible and say,
I want to start leaving myself a bit more room, just because you never know. Doing 2 movies now, you know, it's good, but that scene in particular, and certain one, like I knew exactly how it was going to be shot when I wrote it. So if I get that feeling, especially when I'm writing, then that has to stick through. Obviously, there's subtle variations and stuff, but that one was in particular really fun. Like, we had our boom operator was in the tree all day long. Chris had a bag on his head and was tied to a tree all day. And then, but then from a technical level, like my Steadicam operator, who worked on Keough as well and is amazing, had to memorize the entire scene and all the dialogue and the beats and why the camera shifts here and when it shifts there and when it comes around. Obviously, the end goal being like you don't even notice that, but you feel it. You know, you feel the tension in it, and it just envelops you in the scene.
I think we have time for one more question, or 2 more. One more right here. First one.
Hi, my question's for Trey, but we're in a real period of like well-crafted and well-made horror movies. And my question for you is, what steps did you take to sort of make your own personal but really good horror film and just story in a sense and get the support you need, like financially, or someone to produce it or distribute it? And what steps could someone like me take to sort of get that out there as well?
Well, I know just for me, it like I said before, first it just stemmed from the personal. Like, the script was from such a personal place and I cared about it so much. And it was, I think it was that, like, of course, as I would pitch it like, this is my version of a horror movie and everything, but it wasn't even exactly that way, you know? It's just like, I dig these movies, I dig that, and I have something to say, and it just came out. And then I was just fortunate, like, after I had any kind of success with Keough, people were interested, like A24 was like, what do you want to do next? And I was like, I want to do this. It's this little script I wrote, and they dug it, and they were like, let's make it. And we did it. So it was simple and easy, you know what I mean? But it was like, it was just being prepared, you know? And like, I wrote this way before I even had a first feature, like when I had a short and stuff. But then when that time had happened, I was ready. So yeah.
Can I add something to that? If I were you, if you want to push that kind of movie out into the world, I think A24 is a really marvelous place for the interested in that stuff. They made The Witch. Yeah, and also Jason Blum, I think, you know, I'm not here to promote Jason Blum, but he's a great guy. I made a movie with him. He made Get Out. He made, you know, he's into, that's all he wants, not all he wants to do, but that's what he does. Blumhouse. And I know, because I've worked there, is that they have a team of people there that are constantly reading anything that's submitted there. And if you write something great, then it will rise to the top, and the higher executives will read it. So, I mean, if you know, write stuff, send it.
And
put it out there.
Bring you to it. That's what's going to make it unique.
Get a lot of fake blood. Get ready.
Next question, last question right here.
Hi, quick question for Trey. So obviously you wrote this as like a single location movie, but when you found the location, did you have to adjust the script? Because I know a lot of times if you're writing things for like one house, you need to write it with a house in mind. You block it specifically, and then you might find something completely different. So how did finding your location affect the plot or the story?
Great question.
It's a great question. And with Keough, it was like I wrote the script for my mom's house, which I lived in. I knew every nook and cranny and exactly how to shoot it, and it was so great. And my biggest fear with this movie was not finding the house. And when I wrote this house, it was the house I grew up in, my grandparents' house in the middle of the country. And I literally had a blueprint of that house and how I was writing scenes. So one of the hardest things was being able to be flexible with that and fluid and break it and be open to new, and it took a while, you know. I remember going to Canada and scouting, and we had, like, for tax incentives, we had to shoot 40 minutes outside of Toronto, and the house wasn't there. Like, my best thing, I was gonna try to combine 3 houses into one, which is absurd. And then we went to upstate New York, and we found this house, and at first when we found it, I didn't know if it was the house. It was incredible, but I didn't know for sure. But then I spent more time in it and the space, and then with my DP, we think the same. We just start like, oh, we could do this here, we could swap this here, and you know, it all starts clicking, and it leads from there. Yeah.
Guys, congratulations on the film. It's an incredible piece of work. Congratulations,
man.
Trey.
Thank you.
When can people see it? When can people see
June 9th.
June 9th? All right, congratulations. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.